Is Todd Monken out of the running for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers offensive coordinator vacancy? This is something that has bubbled to the surface lately as some of our colleagues over at pewterreport.com have been talking about the possibility of Todd Monken denying the Tampa Bay Buccaneers for their offensive coordinator vacancy. Joining me yet again is my colleague over at BucsNation.com, the co-host of the Cannon Fire podcast and the main host of the Real to Real podcast, Mr. Evan Wanish. Evan, how you doing today?
I'm doing quite well. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. Now, let me talk about how this came up, right? This is being recorded on February 13th. And I was reading a couple of articles over at pewterreport.com from our colleague Scott Reynolds. And Scott said something pretty interesting in one or two of his articles. I believe it was a Q&A article that I had read, Evan. And in this article, it had talked about the possibility that Todd Monken has just flat out denied the Buccaneers for their offensive coordinator vacancy. Is that a pretty fair understanding of that, Evan?
So yeah, Scott Reynolds does the mailbag, and he was asked a question about sort of kind of what's the hold up, and are they doing their due diligence, or is there no offensive coordinator that's willing to come to Tampa, which I know you've covered actually as well.
Right.
And Scott kind of said it's a little bit of both. Like the Bucs are doing their due diligence, like they want to get it right. They're not going to rush it, but also, yeah, it might be tough to find a guy. And he mentioned in that we already knew about Dan Pitcher. He had mentioned Dan Pitcher. We knew about that one, but he had mentioned that there is no doubt the team has been turned down by a couple of candidates, including Georgia offensive coordinator Todd Monken and Cincinnati quarterbacks coach Dan Pitcher, who's considered the front runner at one point. So, I mean, Reynolds isn't exactly making an article out of this saying Monken turned down the Bucs, but the way he's making it sound with his words there is that it does seem like, whether the Bucs decided, hey, like we know we're probably not the best situation for you. We're just going to move on. Or if Monken flat out said, like I'm out. But day by day, as time goes on and the Bucs continue to interview more candidates and get away from that original list that they had, it seems like those types of guys may be less and less likely to get the job. And that includes a guy like Todd Monken.
Yeah, it's almost like, and I don't, it's I'm not going to discredit the possibility of any of the other guys getting this position, any of the initial wave of guys, but it's almost like they've almost like restarted their search in a sense, kind of. Is that, kind of your feeling on this, Evan?
Yeah, I mean, I think so because here's the thing. Now you know that Tom Brady's not your quarterback. And I think that might have been a big deal with Todd Monken, maybe. I think if Brady was the quarterback, I think that's something you could use to lure Monken back to the NFL and get him away from a cushy job at Georgia, a great job. He's getting paid as one of the highest offensive coordinators in all of college football. He's going to have a chance to three-peat for the title. So I think that could have been something to appeal to Monken. Now that Brady's not there, Monken made us say, well, why would I take this job with a either Kyle Trask or possibly a bridge quarterback, and with Todd Bowles maybe being on the hot seat? So I think if Brady were to have stayed, that would have brought the chances up for Monken a good bit. But to me, like throughout, and we and you have talked about this off air a lot. Throughout this process, I think the one guy who I figured was going to likely have the power, I should say, to say like, "No, nah, I'm good," is Todd Monken because of the position he's in. It was not going to be easy to lure him away from Georgia, but the Buccaneers gave it a shot, and I mean, it's not completely over until they hire an offensive coordinator, and it's not named Todd Monken, but it certainly seems to be trending in that direction. And they interviewed Todd Monken, and then the next day, Tom Brady retired. So you haven't really heard anything about Monken since that point, and I think that's kind of telling.
Yeah, as we've said in multiple videos, right? We've covered so many videos regarding the Bucks offensive coordinator search. So many different types of topics, a lot of highs, a lot of lows, and it's been interesting. And I think one of the more interesting points is that, yeah, as we get further away from those original few candidates that interviewed right after the Buccaneers fired Byron Leftwich, I think the less likely it is that those guys are going to be in the running. Dan Pitcher is already out. He's staying with Cincinnati. He's got a pretty cushy job there as well. It wouldn't be surprising if a similar thing could be said for a guy like Todd Monken in his situation. Like you said, Evan, they're coming back off of a national championship win, a national championship win the year before as well. Like Georgia's doing really good. Todd Monken's in a great spot. Heck, you could argue that Todd Monken may even get head coaching opportunities, be it at the collegiate level or the NFL level, if he continues to do some really good work over there with Georgia. So, why kind of run the risk if you're a Todd Monken? And I've said this before in the other video, right? I said this before, like, oh, are the Buccaneers having trouble bringing an offensive coordinator? And I said no, ultimately. Like, they are doing their due diligence, they're taking their time, and there are still positives to being the OC of the Buccaneers. I still believe that, but it's also a possibility that it can be a case by case basis with some of these guys. If guys are in good positions and guys could go pursue other opportunities in the near future, for example, a guy like Dan Pitcher, guess what? He may be the offensive coordinator of the Bengals next, like what me and you have talked about off air. You said that to me. Or he could be getting considerations for head coaching opportunities. A very similar thing could be said for Todd Monken as well. They might not need an offensive coordinator spot, not just for the Buccaneers, but just the NFL in general. That's a legitimate possibility there. Is that a fair thing to say, Evan?
Yeah, I mean, if Monken continues to have success, yeah, to speak on your point earlier, yeah, he could get a lot of different opportunities. And here's the thing, when you talk about is the Bucks job attractive? On one hand, yes, because as I keep saying, there is only 32 offensive coordinator jobs in the NFL. And in this job, with a defensive minded head coach, you're likely going to get a lot of control of your offense. However, I think it's pretty well known that, like, now it's not a given, it's not a guarantee, but if the Buccaneers win 4 or 5 games next year, like, Todd Bowles is likely out. And if Todd Bowles is out, that means whoever the offensive coordinator is also looking for a new job. So, what offensive coordinator wants to take the risk of a 1 year stint, basically? And I think that's where they might be having a little bit of trouble. But also the pro, and me and you talked about, you get to pick your own quarterback essentially. If you want Kyle Trask, you can have Kyle Trask. If you don't want Kyle Trask, you can have a Jacoby Brissett or Baker Mayfield. If you are going to pound the table for an Anthony Richardson or something, maybe the Bucks make a move up like that. I don't anticipate that, but perhaps. So there's pros and cons. And I just think that right now, just like you said, the candidates that are in the most comfortable positions, Todd Monken, Georgia, best team in college football. Todd Monken could go for a three-peat. Dan Pitcher, one of the best teams in football, just went to the AFC Championship game after going to the Super Bowl the year before. These coordinators have the power when they're in comfortable positions like that to sort of tell the Buccaneers no. And I do believe it's a case by case basis. But I'm sure a lot of those guys interviewing want the job because, quite frankly, if they didn't have any interest in the job, they would have declined to interview, just like Pep Hamilton did with the Buccaneers when they requested to interview him. He declined. So if they didn't have any interest, they wouldn't even be interviewing in the first place. Why waste your time? So while I think there's certainly not like, oh, a deterrent for the Buccaneers, like stay far away. I also don't think it's like the hottest job on the market either, because there's a lot of teams still that need an offensive coordinator.
Yeah, it will be interesting, but for now, it's obviously not set in stone. It's not a report or anything, but what did Scott Reynolds say? No doubt. There's no doubt that they've been turned down by Todd Monken and Dan Pitcher. Is that what?
Yeah, and I think he sort of, he might be assuming that because the pitcher report, and then, sort of not really hearing anything about Monken anymore. So, I do think that's where you sort of draw that conclusion that, hey, like, I mean, they had a second interview with Dan Pitcher. They quickly scheduled a second interview with Thomas Brown, and there's been nothing about Monken. So, yeah, I would assume most likely Monken will not be the Buccaneers offensive coordinator this season.
And I know it's going to be disappointing for people to hear. I know that Todd Monken was a candidate that was on a lot of people's lists at the very top. Number one
No,
guy.
it was pretty high on the Buccaneers list as well.
Yeah, I mean, me and you both talked about it. He was our number one guy as well in terms of potential offensive coordinator candidates. And if
Takes two to tango.
it does, and if this is the possible speculation or possible end of the possibility of Todd Monken coming here, well, folks, let's not panic. Let's not hit the doom and gloom button just yet. There are still a lot of solid candidates out there. Thomas Brown, I think, is a very solid candidate. Shea Tierney is a really good candidate as well. Dave Canales, those are some of my top 3 guys up there, right now as it stands. So, Evan, again, I want to thank you so much for being here on this video. Folks, let us know your thoughts and opinions about the possibility of Todd Monken being out as a candidate for the offense coordinator vacancy for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Go check out Evan's work over at BucsNation.com, the Cannon Fire podcast, whenever they do decide to upload, and the Reel to Reel podcast as well. We would love to obviously see you guys go to all those places. Anyway, guys, thanks so much for watching this video. Hope y'all enjoyed, and we will see you all in the next video or the next live stream. But until then, and as always, guys, goodbye for now, and go Bucs.